It's time for another edition of our military community. I'm Jerry Tabatt. We have got some things going on in this community with a gentleman that I don't know how he finds the time to do all this, but we're talking about the Bay Defense Alliance. We're talking about the Florida Defense Support Task Force. He's got a real estate company here in town, and I think his wife said he's going to get cloned one of these days. But without further ado, let me introduce you to a great friend of mine and a great person in this community, Mr. Tom Neubauer. Tom, thanks for coming in today.
Well, Jerry, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you again.
You and I have known one another for many, many years, and I know the things that you've been doing, but let's kind of educate the community. Take us from the time you first got here with the real estate into what you're into now and why you're doing
Well, I've
all
always
this.
been part of the military community. You know, we've lived on Air Force bases all our lives and never been more than a few miles from a base, and I've been to about 90 bases over the years. So that's always been part of I've never served, and I feel like I should be getting something back. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
And you are giving something back. Now we got a couple of different areas we want to talk about. First of all, we'll do the Bay Defense Alliance, and then we'll get down to the Florida Defense Support Task Force. But I want to break down each one of them individually, and then we'll kind of combine them together and see how they're so intertwined. So first of all, Tom, let's go to the Bay Defense Alliance. What is it? How do you organize it? And who are your members?
I think people get confused because we have a military affairs committee that started in 1946.
Yes.
I mean, it's been a lot of years, and it started that love affair between the community and the bases, and it's a really important part of our community. So that has got 330 people.
Wow.
Working with that group, and they're the welcoming social side of Bay County in the military. So what happened is back in '91, 3 BRAC processes were started. Base Realignment and Closure Commission was established by legislation. And the intent was to shrink all the military installations in the country because there was about 25% too much infrastructure. Well, we were paying some attention to that, and lo and behold, all of a sudden our Navy base showed up on the closure list. And it was panic time that we're going to have to figure out how to get the base off. So a group from the Chamber of Commerce, from the Military Affairs Committee, and the chairman of the chamber went to Jacksonville, and we argued it off the list successfully. And we started looking at the number of bases they closed in the '91 BRAC. It was literally, it's flabbergasting. There were 97 closures overall. And we decided it's very important to do something different. Larry Dantzler was the outgoing MAC chairman. I was on the board at the chamber, and a few people sat around the table and said, we've got to come up with a way to really understand the missions at our bases, to develop trust relationships with our congressional delegation, with military leadership, and make sure that we protect the bases in the next 2 BRAC rounds, which were '93, '95, and then one finally in 2005. And so we stood up this committee, and it's just limited to 30 people. It's a wonderful group of people. About 10 of them are former military members, and 2 or 3 of them have actually were wing commanders or base commanders at NSA at Tyndall. And then several other flag officers that bring with them tremendous amount of knowledge and information that we need. 10 of them are civilians like me that just love supporting the bases. And which, ironically, it didn't surprise me when I looked at it, but 10 of our members are past chairmen of the Military Affairs Committee. And so you can see that they fell in love with the military and decided to stay with it.
You know, and things are really changing too, Tom. I mean, when you guys first started this, the military, you know, especially like Tyndall, it was a training base. It's completely changed. It's no longer just a basic training base. They're ready to go. They can be deployed anywhere that they need to go. So on this mission that you guys have, how is this changing day to day, and how are you guys adapting to it?
Yeah, it's really important that what we understood going through the BRACs is that there was a criteria that the Department of Defense followed, and it was what's the military value in the installation, what's the next generation mission that they're doing, what's the surge capacity, what's the return on investment if we close the base, how quick will we get our costs back? So we had to look at those things, and we have transformed, like you said, from a training base into a next generation base at Tyndall, and the same at the Navy base. What goes on behind the fence at the Navy base is just amazing. It's tip of the spear, research, development, technology, and Tyndall the same way with our new 5th generation fighters. So Part of our community role was to kind of try to make sure that transformation occurred so that we would have next generation missions.
Yeah, and you got to you have to walk a fine line here too. Not only are you trying to do things with this Defense Alliance, but also there's elected officials you have to get involved with. There's the community members in that. How do you kind of work together and the specific characteristics of putting everything in one basket so that it comes out good and everybody's happy about it? That sometimes can be difficult.
I'm really proud of the way that the state of Florida has pulled together our congressional delegation, organizations like the Florida Defense Alliance, which represents 13 defense communities in the state, and the Florida Defense Support Task Force. And then we've put those together with our state legislators who also participate on that task force and develop legislation that makes Florida the most defense-friendly state in the country. And that's been the dream, is to come up with the best place for the DoD to do business.
And I know you guys are always coming up with new ideas, working on different projects and things. What are some, like, say, the top 3 projects that you guys are trying to get going right now that you've identified that need your help? What are they?
It's funny, the projects that we have aren't much different than what the governor has requested. Right at the beginning of the task force, when he started as governor, he says, there's 3 things I'd like to do. I'd like to protect the Gulf Range, which we'll talk about in a minute, how important that is. Second thing is I really want to make sure that Tyndall is rebuilt to its maximum capability. And the third thing was get a piece of Space Force. The space was stood up, space program was stood up in 2019, and it's a huge part of the Air Force, kind of like the Marines is part of the Navy.
Sure.
And it's the next big domain. So the governor says we've got to get a part of space, and that happened. All 3 things have happened.
Now, all you guys get together and you talk about this, and you get together with the legislative leaders in that. How receptive and responsive are they to you? A bunch of civilian guys telling the elected officials, be it state, local, federal even, how do they respond to your inputs?
I think they understand how important the partnership is. There's things that the military cannot do. There's a system where they can interface with Congress through legislative liaison, and they need the civilian community to bring things to the attention of our congressional delegation and the staff that are really important to both the Air Force, Navy, and other branches, and that's kind of where we fit in. Yes. So I just am amazed at how our congressman has worked. He takes his entire staff. Next week, his whole staff will be at Tyndall and at the Navy base because he wants them to understand those missions so that when someone does come in with an issue, they get it. And both of our senators are here all the time. They send their staffers. So that's a big part of working together with our congressional delegation.
No, it takes time. You can't work together in a committee and say, okay, we're gonna do this project here, and next week we'll have an answer. What's generally the time frame when you have, say, something that you guys identify, Tom, that you want to get accomplished?
Sometimes things take 15 years.
Yes.
And just as an example, it was about 15 years ago that we identified 8 acres of property on Thomas Drive by the Navy base. That was really an encroachment problem. You could literally step on top of the fence and onto the base, and it was a security issue. So we started that acquisition project, and it was going to be in a defense bill, so that would be the place for the VA clinic, and it just kept moving slowly through the system. Yeah. And finally, within probably the next 60 days, we'll see that property formally transfer to the Navy. It went to the county. The county stepped up, lost $1 million putting the deal together. They just tore down the old buildings that were there, some townhouses, and there'll be a new mission there at some point.
And that's one of the things, too, that we need to point out, Tom, is everything that you guys are getting done, like with the project out there on the beach with the Navy base, also with this BRAC base realignment and closure, people in this community benefit. And the benefits turn into economic impacts. For example, let's just start with Tyndall right now. All the rebuilding out there, and you're one that's an expert in that, being with real estate and everything. What is the financial impact, and what is the benefit that this community is going to have?
Most people don't realize it, but about 34.6% of our gross domestic product is military in Bay County. That's one of every
Huge.
every three people, and that's about $2.6 billion in impact, and 30,000 people are employed with Department of Defense, are affected by the Department of Defense in this area. So it's a huge part of our economy, but more important is the socioeconomic part of it. Just imagine what it would be like to live in Bay County without those military members here from all over the world.
Yeah.
It'd be a very different place.
Now, it brings up a lot of different needs too. Housing, for example, that's going to be very important. Even though we're seeing new housing and everything, there's a misconception out there, Tom, and you know very well about that people think, okay, you're in the military, don't worry about it. If you want $4,000 a month, the military is going to pay for it. The military doesn't pay for all of it. So how are you guys working on that, which is going to be a financial impact
I'm
to our
glad you
community?
mentioned that, because that's really a big issue right now for both the Navy and the Air Force. They have BAH, Basic Allowance for Housing. It's set based on your rank in the military.
Exactly.
And it's supposed to cover not just your housing costs, but all the utilities and things that go with that. And sometimes there's a gap. They're supposed to do a study pretty often that determines, is the housing in your area going to be sufficient for the BAH that's allowed? So right now we're working with our congressional delegation and with both the Navy and Air Force Base to develop more accurate data that will go back to DoD, and we're trying to raise that BAH so that military members can live in the kind of place they should be living in.
Are you getting any feedback yet?
Yes, it's all been very positive, but other communities around the country have the same problem.
Exactly.
Our housing is not nearly as expensive as it is out in California and in the Northeast.
Sure.
But they have higher BAH there as well. We just have to keep the wheels turning, and there's a good system that works. It just has to be greased now and then.
In addition to these families coming in, be it the Navy base or at Tyndall, the housing, a big thing, of course, going to be impacted. But what about businesses? I know you work very closely with the Bay Defense Alliance, and you actually talk to one another about getting businesses in here.
Yeah, the EDA is one of our partners from the Bay Defense Alliance. We have all the economic development partners you can imagine. Florida State University, Panama City, the Gulf Coast State College is a partner, the Economic Development Alliance, and all those organizations, including Bay County itself, really focus on making sure that we took care of the other two legs of the stool, business development and the basic industry that goes with that. So, yeah, we all work together to make sure those things happen. Becca Harden
keeps you busy at night, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
And
Becca
Tom, of
Harden has
course,
done a job.
by the way, Tom is the president here of our Bay Defense Alliance. Now, let's shift gears a little bit. That's pretty much locally what we wanted to talk about. But now we have to get into the Florida Defense Support Task Force. That is, 5 words that people are saying, okay, Jerry, give us a break. What are we talking about? All right, Tom, the Florida Defense Support Task Force. What is it? What's the organization like? Why are you part of that? And what kind of members do you have?
It's a great organization. And, we stood up the Florida Council on Military Base and Mission Support first at the state. And it was kind of the same situation we had with the Bay Defense Alliance. We saw BRAC coming. Florida had a lot of bases, and they were all vulnerable. And so that was stood up first, but it really wasn't funded. And then finally, in 2011, when Senator Gates was president of the Senate, he stood up the Defense Task Force with funding. And I've been on it ever since. And basically, the idea was that this group would make recommendations on how to protect our bases, how to make Florida the most defense-friendly community in this country, and really support the defense contractors and make this a good environment for them to come and support the bases. Yeah. So it encompasses a lot of things, and I'm really proud of the way it works with Florida Defense Alliance, which is another group.
That's the thing. People don't realize how closely you work together. We'll get that all tied up in a minute, but there's a lot of research and developments that's related strictly to military missions. What are some of those things right now, Tom?
Well, one of the things that's really important to the Air Force was the rebuild of Tyndall as the base of the future. And we saw how that came out of the ground and how the wing commander stood up and made that comment. But everything that fell in place behind that was really important. It's like dominoes. And one of the things that was very important to the Air Force was the chief of staff says, I don't want to send 3 squadrons of F-35s there and not have housing, sufficient medical care,
Right.
good schools. All those things have to be in place. The quality of life has to be right. So he asked for a report every 6 months on where we were post-hurricane. And we did that, and the county provided excellent data on building permits and things that happened. And we're able to show that, yeah, we've got the pipeline that you need.
Now, also with this Defense Support Task Force, you don't just rely on military members themselves, the community in that. You also realize how important it is to have the spouses involved in this. What are some of the things that you're doing through this statewide task force? What are some of the things you're doing to help our military spouses?
That's really important. The quality of life issues with the Air Force called the 5 and Thrive program includes spousal employment. And it's very rare to find a military family that you don't have both spouses working. And so one of the big problems with that is a military spouse will move from one place to the next, and they might be licensed in some realm, and they can't be licensed in Florida for months and months and may not be able to even do the job here. So the legislators that are on the task force over the last few years have developed 85 legislative initiatives, now laws, that make it easy for transformation of any business license and other kinds of licenses as well. They can instantly work under another license and then go through the additional training they might need. And that's really important.
Which helps to relieve a lot of the financial problems that they have. But on the other side of that, these men and women that are coming in, the members and the spouses, a lot of them have children. And one of the things that's really going to be a challenge, and thank goodness we have Mark McQueen on as our superintendent, but what is the support for our school districts that you guys are working locally with to take through our state senators and get it to Tallahassee and say, we need help?
Well, we know how important that is, and one of the things that you might have noticed in recent news is that the Bay District schools stood up 17 Purple Star schools. The Purple Star School program was established by the Florida legislature in 2021. And I think the goal for Superintendent McQueen is to get all the schools in that. And then Gulf Coast State College was the first collegiate campus just months ago that became a Purple Star campus. And that means that they provide the resources that the students need and the teachers need to support the military members that are moving in and out of the school system. It's really a great program. So we're really proud of the way the Bay District schools embraced that and made it happen.
And one thing that's and I'm of course with the Chamber and Military Affairs Committee and everything, and one of the things we're really concerned about, and a lot of people in the community, is in addition to the school districts and helping out our military spouses, we need child care. And I know that's something you guys are working on. What are you trying to work through on that, Tom?
You know, both the Navy base and Tyndall have talked about how very important that is and how difficult it is for them to. And there's some things that go all day. I'm 24/7 at Tyndall and other places where they need daycare all the time.
Exactly.
And everybody's short. They're opening a new child development center at Tyndall that'll hold maybe 310 kids. It's already got a waiting list beyond the 310. So a panel was put together about a month ago at Tyndall, and there were people from the school board, people from child development, people from just about every wake. The sheriff was there, and they covered the entire gamut, had a couple hundred people in the audience that were military members, and we addressed all those things. And child care is one that the Chamber of Commerce has now set up a special committee to work on, and we're going to come up with solutions.
And of course, anybody that wants to get any input, your number and everything will be at the end of this interview, and they can talk to you about it. But those are some of the things we're working on now. Okay, let's say that we need to line up some contractors. We need to have their employees come in with the contractors. How do you work with the state to make sure that they know that if you're giving them local contractors' names and everything, that they can be trusted and they're going to do a good job? Because a lot of these contractors for these military bases, they're paid with federal dollars. So they have to be real careful. So how do you make the state aware of all of this, and licenses and all of that? It's not easy.
Yeah, I think that was really accentuated when the rebuild for Tyndall started happening. It was very important that they have 4,000 workers at Tyndall. They'll surge to that probably by fall. And they had to have people that could actually be let onto the base, didn't have felonies on their record or other issues. So the Air Force has got a leader out there that has really worked this pretty hard. And this colonel has made sure that every contractor is vetted. Some of them are large national contractors, but they're encouraged to use local support. And it's working very well. I don't know of any shortages they're having. Even through COVID, they were able to find the support they needed to get the job done.
A lot of it's getting that monies to come in, being allocated so that you can pay for what you're doing.
And that's happening. With the help of our congressional delegation, we got the first $4.2 billion. Since then have added another $1 billion, and Tyndall construction is going vertical as we speak. So
now, one of the things with this Florida Defense Support Task Force, you have a senator here from Bay County that is great working with you all. Tell us about how important it is to have Senator Jay Trumbull working with you guys hand in hand, and how has he taken these things to Tallahassee and got things done, because sometimes people down in Miami don't understand what's going on up here, but he's got a knack for that. So
it's not just as his senator. His time as a representative was really powerful for our communities through some very difficult times. He knows Bay County. He grew up here. He knows the bases very well. He's been supportive of the task force, of the BDA, and has served on the Florida Defense Support Task Force. So he and Jimmy Patronis both have delivered so much input into the state's projects, and I'd see nothing but blue sky ahead of us because of his position in the Senate and his time that he spent in appropriations chair in the House.
And that's the thing. You mentioned Jimmy Patronis and Senator Trumbull. They're local, homegrown, so they understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
They've been here since children, and they know what business is like. They know what problems we have. And there's always a smile on their face because they love this panhandle.
Absolutely do, and you can see it. And what's great is when someone brings up the important missions that are going on, say at the Navy base, they can tell you exactly what's going on there. The tip of the spear in expeditionary warfare, mine warfare, all the systems that are being developed by the Navy in research, test, and evaluation, and those are the things that they're promoting from the state as well as from the federal government.
And this is a well-oiled machine, and you're, of course, you're vice chair of the Florida Defense Support Task Force, and that's why Margaret, your wife, said I'm going to get him cloned. But let's kind of tie these things together now, Tom. We have the Bay Defense Alliance, which is pretty much Bay County, and doing the things here, identifying things, and then the Florida Defense Support Task Force. You're not separate entities. You work very closely together. So let's tie them together. Yeah,
Florida Commerce has pulled us all together, and they've restructured the Section 288 and 987 of the Florida statute to make all of this work well. But there's another organization called the Florida Defense Alliance, and that's the group that brings the 13 defense communities together. Literally, they meet 4 times a year. They talk about base buffering and encroachment and quality of life issues. They bring issues to the task force and say, we need legislation that will help us with spousal employment or help us with this issue. And that's what created this Florida Veterans Guide, which is available online, or I can get you copies of it. And military members that move here can look at that and say, oh my goodness, I've got all these assets that are put together by the local group. That's where the recommendations come from, through the Florida Defense Alliance, and then to the task force. And I think that's how we work so well together, is sharing that data.
And like I said, it's like a well-oiled machine. Now, another thing that a lot of people don't realize, Tom, is in addition to your business here, you travel a lot with these. Where's some of the places you go? And let's say you went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Why do you go out to different bases and things?
Well, we started that in the state. To be really familiar and understand the bases, we hold our meetings at a different base almost every month. Sometimes in Tallahassee, but most of the time we go to a different Florida base, and I've been to all of them. And each time you go, you learn more about the mission so you can fully understand it, and when an issue comes up, you can address it. And we're doing the same thing on a national scale. I'm part of the Air Combat Command Commanders Group, and we look at ACC bases around the country. And as a member of the Air and Space Force Civic Leaders, We look all over the DoD, but I've been to probably 90 bases, and it's very important to really learn about a mission and how it fits into, say, what Tyndall's doing, what the Navy base is doing, because they all depend on each other.
And one thing about this too, Tom, is as you go out to these different places and visit these different bases in different states and that, it's kind of remarkable that really the individual bases in these individual states are faced with some of the same problems you are having here in our area. So it's easy to talk to one another. Have you found anything really different as you go out at Bay County?
No, we get a lot of benefit by interfacing with those people. They all have the same problems. You know, when the BRAC program started in '91, we were playing defense. We just had to protect the bases, not sharing a lot of data with our colleagues across the country because they were fighting for their bases too. And it wasn't until the last few years that we realized that we've got to pull together. And there's still some risk of BRAC. There's no appetite for it. But people are trying to expand the missions on their bases, make them better, improve quality of life, make all of the things that the Air Force and the Navy and the Army are looking at as this is why I should keep the base. So we work together and we share ideas. Some great ideas have come from Texas and Virginia and other places, and we share those with the Florida legislature and try to develop similar programs.
That's what's good about it. All right, Tom, what are you guys working on next? What's your biggest project right now that you want people to know about here?
Well, I think getting Tyndall built is a big deal. And we're starting to see a lot of senior military leaders visit Tyndall.
Yes.
And that's because, well, this is the base of the future. This is going to be our prototype for the next Air Force base that's built. And that's a great thing, having them come here, because what we're looking for is the next generation mission. You know, will we be able to attract the CCAs, the Combat Collaborative Aircraft, which are part of the NGAD, the next generation of air dominance?
Right.
Those are the kinds of things that could bring thousands of people. And when you've got a range like the Gulf of Mexico range that is just a huge part of all the Panhandle bases, you really have some opportunity.
Yeah.
3 squadrons of F-35s, potential for a 4th someday because of the EIS was done that way, possibly collaborative aircraft coming into the mix, which are unmanned systems, next generation. All those things make it pretty exciting.
Yes, I can tell you're excited about all this. We could talk for another hour on this, but we got just a couple of minutes to go. So, Tom, what's your final thoughts about the BDA and the Florida Defense Support Task Force?
It's not just the 30 people on the BDA. They're amazing people that bring so much talent. It's also the people in our community. You know, what makes military members feel welcome here and love Bay County is the way that you treat them in the grocery store or in the school system or at church. They fit in here and become part of our family. And the job that they do, and I've seen this all over the country, is really pretty amazing. And that's why we're free. And that's why we're not speaking another language, is these people are working every day to make sure that we're the strongest military in the world.
And we are so happy that you are working so hard in this community and all your other members. Tom, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for
we
having
appreciate it. Best of luck, and keep up the good work, and just let everybody know what's going on. They can figure this out when they go online and take a look at things. All right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that's it. This is another edition of our military community. A lot of information here about the Bay Defense Alliance, the Florida Defense Support Task Force, but the big thing that you need to remember is that there are people out there in this community, not only locally, statewide, nationwide, that are trying to help and get this community going and everything, and look for big changes at Tyndall, look for big changes at the Navy base, and support our local community. Everybody, we need to work together on this, and like Tom said just a minute ago, we're free and we don't speak a foreign language, and that's what's so important. All right, that'll do it for this edition of our military community. I'm Jerry Tabatt. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time.